Hey, Nathan here, welcome back to another GarageBand tutorial from the TDCS. And last tutorial we discussed, well, it wasn't really a tutorial, I just gave you an overview on what one of my piano roll songs was. I just went over the basics of the piano roll. We'll go in more in depth on that this tutorial. So basically this tutorial is going to get you a feel for the piano roll and get you an introduction. Now, if you create a song with a piano roll, just the piano roll, and you want it to be like a 4-minute song, be prepared to spend weeks trying to do that. So for this tutorial, I'm not going to give you a 70-hour tutorial just showing you how to create a good song with the piano roll. So I'll just show you how to create a simplistic song. Maybe we'll just do one piano, maybe piano and drums, and you can build on it from there, just like we did with the loops tutorial. Remember, in the tutorial, it was only like 2 or 3 different loops that I added into the project. And then once the tutorial was done, I decided to go further, and I spent about 4 hours, and you heard the final result. If you use a piano roll, just the piano roll, it'll probably take 5 times longer to do something like that and make it sound good. Alright, so let's go ahead and create a new project. Let's set it as loops, choose, and let's call this piano roll tutorial. I'll save it anywhere, it doesn't really matter. Tempo, we can change the tempo later, so let's just click create. Alright, so now that we have the project created, let me resize the window here. Alright, so now let's go to track, new track, software instrument, and click create. And let's just go with the grand piano and press this little eye icon so we don't need to worry about that interfering with the screen. Okay, so now how to start the piano roll. You have to double click this track, double click the timeline in the track right here, and that will bring up the piano roll. Now if we go back to the very top where we have the timeline, hold down the command key on your keyboard and click your left mouse. So now we have a section that we can manipulate with the piano roll. Now I'm going to extend this to one more section. So I'll extend it to 3. Now I like to turn the metronome on. That way, if you're playing her at the same time, it's good to keep the metronome on so you know that you're on beat and things like that. But you can turn it off, but just clicking this here. So now if we hear it, that's what the metronome sounds like. Okay, so I do not want this to play indefinitely. I want it to just loop this section here. So in order to do that, I need to click this little loop icon down here. Now I can bring in this yellow bar. So now if I go back to the very beginning, that's what this icon means, and press play. Now to loop just that single section. Now there's multiple ways you can do this. You can click this record button and bring up the either keyboard or musical typing, or you can just manipulate it directly in the piano roll. That's what I'm going to cover here, because I have a weird keyboard setup. I probably won't do that well with a keyboard or musical typing. So I'm going to just manipulate the piano roll. Alright. So what we want to do here is we just want to create a simple, very simple effect for the piano, a rhythm. So what we want to do is let's choose a middle ground, and you can click these here to hear what it sounds like. So C3 is kind of a good middle ground, but I'm going to go one below it. And I'm going to hold down the command key so I get the little pencil tool, and I'm going to click the one below it. So this one. One below C3, right there. Okay. So now, if you want to copy the same note, you hold the Alt key or the Option key, and you click, and then you hold down the click button, the left mouse button, and then you'll see a plus icon right below the mouse. So you just move it across. So I can move it all the way across. I want to keep it, I don't want to have it one single note, because I want to keep it note, 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 instead of note, and it will be a sustained note. So it's note, 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 note. Okay. So that single note by itself is not very good, so I'm going to do one above it. And you can move these around individually if you want to. Oops. So you can draw up here and then move it around if you want to. Now that top one doesn't sound that complementary to the one below it. It sounds weird. So I'm going to move it up one more. Remember, I'm using the white, not the sharps here, or flats. So I'm just using the notes. So now let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay. So now one final thing that I want to do is I want to create a note below it, but it will not operate on the same beat. It's going to be kind of something like that. So let's create one below it, but let's offset it. Let's try this. And there's a quicker way to do this. You can create two and then highlight those two and then copy those two. And then you have the 4 and then you copy the 4, and you can just do this a lot faster than I just did it. Now that's way too fast, so let's offset it a little bit more. Now that's on beat. That's perfect. That sounds perfectly. Alright, so I want to keep this, but let's see what it sounds like when I increase the velocity of these two notes. Remember, I mentioned in a previous tutorial that velocity handles the how hard you hit the note. So if I put this up to max, now let's see what it sounds like. Now max doesn't really sound that good, but I was just doing that for demonstration. So let's just move it up just a little bit, and same thing with this one. Let's move it up to about 75. Let's see what that one's. 75 here. So it's a very subtle effect. So that's what velocity means. Pitch means if we change the pitch here, we just change the pitch of the whole instrument, so we don't want to do that. Now that gets me into the next part. Let's hold down the Option key at the very top here where we have our timeline. Let's hold down the Option key. Let's click and hold, and then let's move this over. So we just have a complete duplicate of this section, but it's not connected. What I mean by not connected is it's not using the same section here. It's using a completely different section. So let's extend this over. Now if I do this, highlight them all, now the pitch should only affect this section. As you see here, we have the -18. This one has normal. So we just modified the pitch of this section. So I want the exact same notes to be played for the second section, but I want it to be a lower pitch. So I'm going to lower it just a little bit. How about -5? Let's see what that sounds like. Alright, so now you can duplicate it again and maybe change it a little bit either in between or higher, something like that. And let's try a little bit higher. Let's try 5. Alright, so now what I want to do is let's leave these pianos the way they are. I might decrease this just a little bit. And let's create a new track. Software instrument, create. Let's try another grand piano, but this one's going to be a little bit more simple. It's going to be just on beat. It's not going to be fast like the one above it. So let's hold down the command key so we can draw a new one, and let's extend this to 3. So let's have this at a, let's see what that sounds like. That sounded okay. Let's extend it. Take these 2, extend these 2, take these 4, extend these 4. So that sounds okay, but I want to try some experimentation. Let's see what it sounds like down here. Sounds a little bit more interesting. Let's increase the velocity of all the notes to 75. Alright, so now I only want to play every other note. Let's see what that sounds like. And let's try it every other one of those. And let's extend them. So now there are 2 sustained notes. And let's increase the velocity just a little bit more. Alright. So now we do the same thing. Copy it over here, change the pitch. -5, copy it, +3. So that sounds okay. Alright, now somebody asked me a question about the score, so let's go into that really quick. Okay, so I'm not gonna manipulate my original stuff here, so let's create a new section here, so we can just manipulate it in here. Alright, so now we're manipulating it in the score instead of in the piano roll. Now just the same way, hold down the command key and then you'll have the notes behind the mouse, and then we just click once, left click once, and now it's on that it actually manipulated the song there. As you see, the piano roll is actually changed up top. Now, if we want to change that note, we just right-click that note and set it to something else. So now we delete that note, and then we have to add it again. And then we just right-click and set it. And it actually will not let you continue. It'll actually change. Basically, it will not let you mess up the whole idea behind music, where you have 4. Well, in this project, we have 4 beats. Okay, so let's bring this over here, and let's play this. Now, it's going to be horrible, so don't expect it to be anything great. But that's how you create stuff with the piano roll and the score. You just change the notes here, or you can right click anywhere in the note area. Then you can change them that way. Alright, so let's go ahead and delete this. And let's go back to here. If you're over here and you cannot, somebody asked me why he could not create any notes here. It's because you need to originally create it in the timeline. You'd have to hold down the command key, so you have to actually get that green bar in the timeline before you can create notes. Okay, so piano roll is my favorite. It's probably because I spent most of my time before GarageBand inside of FL Studio, and if you've used that program, it's pretty much all piano roll basically. I don't know if it's been updated to have anything else. But anyway, let's add some drums. So if we go to track, new track, software instrument, and let's select a drum kit. Now, I only selected the GarageBand, so we do not have the issue of me selecting a symphony orchestra kit like I did last time. Let's go with rock, maybe. See what that sounds like. Alright, so below C3 seems to be where all the drums are. Alright, so I'm going to pick one of them. That might sound good. For me, I need a lot of experimentation, so I would select a drum, see how that sounds with everything else, and see if that sounds good. Alright, let's increase the velocity. And let's increase this to 3. And let's play it again at the 2 mark. Alright. So it's very subtle. If you want to increase you want to hear it a little bit more, just increase the velocity just a little bit. You might be able to barely hear it. So, I'm not going to change the pitch on this one, but I am going to copy it. Because it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to play 2 of them. Let's see what that sounds like. but I'm going to cut this one off. Let's try here. And let's cut this one off. Now that sounds okay. See what happens if I do one below. So I just want to hear this section. Let's try one below it. One below it. Oops, one below it. Too quick. Let's change the velocity of these two below it. All right. So that sounds okay. So let's duplicate the original one and move it over here, and let's hear the full thing. Alright. So this can go on for another 20 hours, and we can come up with like a really good song. Just manipulation of the existing tracks and creating new tracks, trying to match them. Just play around with the settings here and try to come up with at least a 1-minute song, or maybe a 2-minute song if you really want to go for something. But these are the basics. Remember to, if you're good with the musical typing section, you can create a new section here. And let's have it go along with this section here. So I want to create a completely different feel for this top section here. So you can play it. You can change something while it's looping. Now you can do this with the piano roll, or you can do this with the musical typing too. If you play this with the musical typing, you'd have to press the record button. And then if you have several rounds you can do. As you see, I have 3 here. When you play it with the musical typing and you have the record button, it'll loop again, but you'll have a second section that you can attempt. And then you can do that for multiple times. I do not know what the limit is. But you get several different play styles that you can choose from. So you can try the same section 7 times, let's say 7 times, and then you can scrub through the takes, and you can see which one sounds better. Once you do that, you say delete the unused takes. Continue, and then just use that single take. So I'll show you an example. So let's bring this back up. Alright, so we have to bring this back up, and let's try to create a decent take. Now that take's not good. That take might be good. So we'll close it out and press the record button again and stop. So now we have several different takes, and we'll see which one sounds better. Let's see what take one sounded like. So don't want take one. Take two, nothing really happened. Take three. That take wasn't that good. Now you can use a take, but you can change it in the piano roll. If you find that you like the way it sounds, but it's not really on beat or anything, you can say, I want to take this beat, so I'm going to delete all the unused ones. Or take this take, and I'm going to make sure it's on beat. Now you might need to do more manipulation. As I mentioned, you want the notes to kind of go with each other. As you heard, the first note and the piano below it, they didn't really go with each other. It just doesn't sound right. So maybe bring this one up. Maybe bring them all up, see what that sounds like. So what it sounds like down here. So there you go. There's multiple ways you can use a piano roll. You can also use a score if you want to. And you can create multiple tracks that go together. And if you want to, you can always create a loop. So you can add a loop to it. Just click the loop icon, and let's go to orchestral and make sure I'm in the GarageBand, and let's go back to orchestral. Actually, let's go see if they have a beat. So this probably won't sound good, but I'm just going to demonstrate that you can add a loop here, and again, if you select the green one, you can manipulate the loop. So I'm going to go back to the very beginning. Then you can see the score here. And then you can change volume for each track if you want to. So anyway, mix the loops and the piano rolls and try to create a good song. I'm not going to spend any more time on this one. Now, if you really want to get into this, if you already have an iPad too, I would recommend getting the GarageBand application for the iPad. It's pretty cool. I wish I could demonstrate it for you guys. but I don't have any sort of setups or cameras that I can record it with. But it's pretty cool. You can actually play it on the iPad, and it kind of feels right instead of using the normal keyboard, Windows or Mac keyboard, to play an instrument. You're actually playing a on-screen piano or something like that. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you learned something. I hope you want to expand on this and see what songs you come up with. Feel free to drag any of the loops you want to and try to expand it that way. So it can be a completely messed up song at the very end. But anyway, next tutorial I will talk about how to create sound effects. Now the concepts, I'm not actually going to create any for you. I might do a little bit demonstrations, but I'll just go over the concepts on that. So I hope to see you next time.